The storm outside the glass-paneled skyscraper rattled the world like a warning, but inside the towering headquarters of Sterling Enterprises, the real storm was about to begin. Henry Sterling, one of America's youngest self-made millionaires, stood in the center of the marble-floored lobby with fury tightening every line of his face. The usually composed CEO looked shaken, breath uneven, temper on the verge of collapsing the pristine image he had built over the years. His employees watched from a distance, whispering nervously as Henry's furious voice echoed off the high ceilings. The entire building had felt tense since morning, but no one expected things to escalate the way they did, and certainly not toward the janitor, an aging, quiet man named Elijah Brooks, who was pushing his cleaning cart across the polished floor, unaware that his life was about to be thrust under a spotlight he never asked for. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring powerful stories like this to life. The moment Henry's eyes landed on Elijah, something snapped inside him. His expensive leather shoes clicked furiously across the floor as he marched to the older man. Elijah lifted his head slowly, adjusting his glasses with a calmness that irritated Henry even more. Reports earlier that morning had said that Henry's 13-year-old daughter, Emily, had been missing for 2 hours after school, and every minute felt like an eternity. Henry had abandoned a critical meeting, his world collapsing inward, trying to piece together answers from chaos. And when he arrived at the building only to find Elijah polishing the railings, seemingly calm, seemingly unbothered, it ignited something irrational inside him. Elijah wasn't the cause of Henry's fear, but fear often needed someone to land on. Henry's voice rose sharply, accusing Elijah of blocking the emergency parking area, claiming it delayed him from leaving fast enough to search for Emily. The accusation wasn't true, but Henry wasn't thinking clearly. He yelled without stopping, frustration spilling like poison. The employees watched uncomfortably, some wanting to defend Elijah, others too terrified to get involved. Elijah simply stood there, chest rising and falling slowly, absorbing every harsh word without showing anger back. There was something about his steadiness, an inner strength, that even Henry noticed but refused to acknowledge. Just as Henry leaned in to deliver another scathing outburst, the elevator dinged behind them. The doors slid open slowly, revealing a small figure standing inside. Wet hair plastered to her cheeks, bruised knees, and tears barely clinging to her eyes. It was Emily. Everyone froze, breath stilled in their throats. The world slowed as she stepped forward, and then a whisper escaped her lips. Fragile, trembling, yet powerful enough to silence a room filled with fear. "Dad, he saved my life." The words hit Henry with the force of a wrecking ball. Confusion twisted inside him, drowning out his anger. Emily swayed, and Henry rushed to her, holding her face and shaking hands, asking a dozen questions at once. But she didn't look at him first, not immediately. Instead, her tired eyes drifted toward Elijah. She stepped toward the janitor, who still stood quietly with his cleaning cart, and she wrapped her arms around him. It was a gentle, grateful embrace that shattered Henry's misunderstanding in one blow. As Emily clutched Elijah's jacket, her voice came out tired but clear as she began explaining what had happened. After school, she had been followed by 2 older boys, strangers, who tried to corner her near the parking lot. She panicked and ran blindly through an alleyway she didn't recognize, eventually twisting her ankle and falling hard onto the wet pavement. Fear paralyzed her. Her phone had died. She cried for help into the empty street, and then Elijah, on his way home from work, had seen her curled on the ground, shaking, hurt, terrified. He had approached her gently, offered his jacket, calmed her, and carried her until she could walk. He had brought her inside the building, knowing Henry would eventually return in desperation. Emily explained every detail in short, trembling breaths, and Henry felt the weight of each one pierce straight through him. His anger dissolved into shame, his accusations shattered under the truth. Elijah, whom he had shouted at, belittled, humiliated in front of dozens of people, was the very man who had protected his daughter when she needed it most. As the story unfolded, the employees around them lowered their gazes, uncomfortable at the reality of how unfairly Elijah had been treated. The janitor, however, never appeared resentful. His eyes remained soft, almost fatherly, as he watched Emily cling to him. He gently rested a hand on her shoulder, reassuring her with a warmth that spoke of quiet strength and love. Qualities Henry suddenly realized he had overlooked not only in Elijah, but perhaps in himself. Henry swallowed hard. Guilt thick in his throat. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because he lacked money or power, but because he had been given the chance to witness someone else's integrity and found himself falling short. He remembered losing his wife 5 years earlier and how it had made him colder, sharper, hardened. He had forgotten what compassion looked like until a janitor reminded him, not with words but with actions. The building lights hummed softly as Henry turned to Elijah. But no apology felt big enough. Henry's voice wavered as he tried to speak, but Elijah simply nodded, as if forgiving him before he even asked. That simple nod broke the last pieces of Henry's ego. He placed a hand over his daughter's, and as he did, he felt the throb of a truth he had ignored for years. That life wasn't measured by titles, wealth, or power, but by moments of humanity, the kind Elijah carried so naturally. Later, after the medical staff arrived, after Emily was checked and wrapped in blankets, after the chaos settled into calm, Henry retreated to his office. But he didn't close the door. He sat quietly, staring at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows, replaying everything. His life was full of achievements, awards, financial triumphs, yet none of it compared to the gratitude he felt toward a janitor whose name he barely remembered before today. Elijah's compassion exposed something broken inside him. It reminded him of who he used to be before grief consumed him. In the days that followed, Henry approached Elijah with sincerity deeper than any public apology could capture. He asked about his life, his family, his past, things he should have cared about long ago. And that's when he learned Elijah was a widower too, raising a son with disabilities. He worked nights and did part-time repair jobs on weekends to afford therapy sessions for his boy. Despite all the hardship, he carried no bitterness. He simply lived with quiet dignity, helping wherever he could, often without being noticed. Henry listened, heart tightening, as he realized how invisible people could become in a world obsessed with status. Henry offered Elijah a promotion, not out of pity, but out of respect. He offered to fund his son's treatments. Elijah resisted at first, unwilling to take charity, but Henry insisted gently, explaining that helping him was helping himself rebuild a heart he had neglected. Eventually, Elijah accepted, not because he needed recognition, but because he knew Henry was no longer acting as a CEO, but as a man choosing compassion. Rumors spread throughout the company about the dramatic shift in Henry's leadership. He became more patient, more present, more humane. People felt seen again. Meetings ended with genuine questions about well-being instead of numbers. He started initiatives for staff support, mental health programs, and community outreach, all inspired by one moment in a lobby where a janitor lifted a frightened girl and changed the heart of a broken father. Emily, now safe and healing, developed a deep admiration for Elijah. She visited him during breaks, bringing him snacks, thanking him endlessly, and listening to his stories. Elijah became someone precious to her, a symbol of courage, kindness, and the unexpected heroes the world often overlooks. Henry, watching from a distance, often felt waves of gratitude swelling in his chest. 1 year later, during the company's annual celebration, Henry asked Elijah to stand beside him on stage. The employees were shocked at first, but then they burst into applause. Henry shared the story publicly, not to humiliate himself, but to honor Elijah's quiet bravery. He spoke about humility, compassion, and how wealth meant nothing if it didn't create room for kindness. Elijah's eyes grew moist, though he tried to hide it. The applause that followed lasted longer than any the company had ever given, and Henry knew it was deserved. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps these emotional stories reach more people. Before we end, special request, comment below what lesson you took away from this story. And as the night closed around the glowing skyscraper, Henry Sterling realized something profound. He had once believed his legacy would be found in numbers, in buildings, and business empires. But now he understood that true legacy lived in moments of compassion, in the courage of an ordinary janitor, in the innocence of a child he saved, and in the transformation of a man who finally remembered what it meant to feel